Hello everyone. So this is Dr. K. Jagannayaki, Professor in MBA Department, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Today's topic is research report writing. So before going to enter into report writing, I would like to discuss about interpretation. So interpretation is that after collecting and analyzing the data, the researcher has to accomplish the task of drawing inferences followed by report writing. So this has to be done very carefully, otherwise misleading conclusions may be drawn and the whole purpose of doing research may get vitiated. So that is the reason one should be very careful while interpreting and developing a report. So interpretation is nothing but the task of drawing inferences from the collected facts after an analytical and or experimental study. So the task of interpretation has two major aspects: the effort to establish continuity in research through linking the results of a given study with those of another, and the establishment of some explanatory concepts. So interpretation concerned with relationships within the collected data, particularly overlapping analysis. It also extends beyond the data of the study to include the results of other research, theory, and hypothesis. Why interpretation? So interpretation is essential for the simple reason that the usefulness and utility of research findings lie in proper interpretation. So it is being considered a basic component of research process because of the following reasons. The first reason is that the researcher can well understand the abstract principle that works beneath his findings. Another one can link up his findings with those of other studies having the same abstract principle and thereby can predict about the concrete world of events. So interpretation leads to the establishment of explanatory concepts that can serve as a guide for future research studies. So when you are interpreting the data, so we used to find out some kind of facts and which are useful for future research studies. So it opens new avenues of intellectual adventures and also stimulates the quest for more knowledge. So through interpretation, why his findings are what they are, and they can make others to understand the real significance of his research findings. The interpretation of the findings of exploratory research study often results into hypothesis for experimental research, and as such interpretation is involved in the transition from exploratory to experimental research. Any oral presentation or and written statement which is used to communicate research results, strategic recommendations, and other conclusions to management or other specific audience. For a small project, a short oral or written report on the results may be all that is needed. Extensive projects may involve many written documents, interim reports, a long final written report, and several oral presentations. In addition, technical materials may be posted on an organization's intranet. Then, what are the techniques of interpretation? So, interpretation it is an art that one learns through practice and experience. The technique of interpretation often involves the following steps. Researcher must give reasonable explanation and interpret the lines of relationship in terms of the underlying processes to find out the thread of uniformity that lies under surface layer of his diversified research findings. So the researcher supposed to give valid statements about his research study. In fact, this is the technique of how generalization should be done and concepts be formulated. And second one is extraneous information. If collected during the study, must be considered while interpreting the final result of research study, for it may prove to be a main factor in understanding the problem under consideration. It is advisable before embarking upon the final interpretation to consult someone having insight into the study and who is frank and honest and will not hesitate to point out omissions and errors in logical argumentation. So we need to seek expertise advices while interpreting the data. The researcher must accomplish the task of interpretation only after considering all relevant factors affecting the problem to avoid false generalization. Then coming to the report format. So what will be the format of a report? How to develop a report? So every research report is custom made for the project. It represents some conventions of report format are universal. So it represents a consensus about the parts necessary for a good research report, and it tells us how they should be ordered, suggests the use of its own unique format, and every report writer has to pick and choose the section and order that will work best for the project at hand. So many companies and universities also have in-house report formats, writing guides for writers to follow. So precautions in interpretation. Researcher must pay attention to the following points for correct interpretation. The researcher must invariably satisfy himself that a data are appropriate, trustworthy, and adequate for drawing inferences. And second one is that the data reflect good homogeneity and proper analysis has been done through statistical methods. The researcher must remain cautious about the errors that can possibly arise in the process of interpreting results. He must always keep in view that the task of interpretation is very much intertwined with analysis and cannot be distinctly separated. And he must never lose sight of fact that his task is not only to make sensitive observations of relevant occurrences but also to identify and disengage the factors that are initially hidden to the eye. So this will enable him to do his job of interpretation on proper lines. The researcher must remember that ideally in the course of a research study, there should be constant interaction between initial hypothesis, empirical observation, and theoretical conceptions. Then significance of research reporting. So research report is considered as a major component of the research, but the research talk remains incomplete till the report has been presented and or written. So as a matter of fact, the most brilliant hypothesis, highly well designed and conducted research study, and the most striking generalizations and findings are of little value unless they are effectively communicated to others. So writing of report, it is the last step in research process and requires a set of skills somewhat different from those of earlier stages of the research study. So this task should be accomplished by the researcher with utmost care. He may seek the assistance and guidance of experts for the same purpose. Then what are the steps involved in writing report? The usual steps involved in report writing are logical analysis of the subject matter, preparation of the final outline, preparation of rough draft, rewriting and polishing, and preparation of the final bibliography and writing the final draft. So these are the steps involved in a report writing. The first one, logical analysis of the subject matter. So it is concerned with the development of a subject. There are two ways in which a researcher can develop a subject, logically and chronologically. So the logical development is made on the basis of mental connections and associations between one thing and another by means of analysis. Logical treatment often consists in developing the material from the simple possible to the most complex structures. Whereas coming to the chronological development, it is based on a connection or the sequence in time or occurrence. The directions for doing or making something usually follow the chronological order. The second step is preparation of the final outline. So outlines are the framework upon which long written works are constructed. They are an aid to the logical organization of the material, and it's like a reminder of points to be stressed in the report. And next step is preparation of the rough draft. So this follows the logical analysis of the subject and the preparation of the final outline. So this step is most important for the researcher to write down what he has done in the context of his research study. He will write down the procedure adapted in collecting the material along with various limitations faced by him, the technique of analysis adapted by him, the broad findings, generalizations, various suggestions he want to offer regarding the problem concerned. So, in brief, if you would like to say, he used to discuss the methodology, how he's going to carry out, how he adapted a particular study, how he has collected the data, what type of samples he has taken, and what are the appropriate tools used for the analysis, everything mentioned under this step. It's rewriting and polishing of the rough draft. So this step happens to be most difficult part of the formal writing. Usually this step requires more time than the writing of the rough draft. The careful revision makes the difference between a mediocre and a good piece of writing. While rewriting and polishing, one should check the report for weaknesses in logical development or presentation. And preparation of final bibliography. So this is another step, and it tells us the task of preparation of final bibliography. The bibliography, which is generally appended to the research report, includes a list of books in some way pertinent to the research. So the bibliography should be arranged alphabetically and may be divided into two parts: the names of books and pamphlets and the names of magazines and newspaper articles. Then comes writing the final draft. So this is the last step in report writing process. The final draft should be written in a concise and objective style in simple language. and avoiding vague expressions such as it seems, there may be, and the like ones. So, while writing the final draft, the researcher must avoid abstract terminology and technical jargon. Illustrations and examples based on common experiences must be incorporated in the final draft as they happen to be most effective in communicating the research findings to others. So, a research report should not be dull but must enthuse people and maintain interest and must show originality. It must be remembered that every report should be an attempt to solve some intellectual problem and must contribute to the solution of a problem and must add to the knowledge of both the researcher and the reader. Then, coming to the layout of the research report, the layout of the report means as to what the research report should contain. A comprehensive layout of the research report should comprise preliminary pages, the main text, and the end matter. Preliminary pages. So it should carry a title, a date, followed by acknowledgements in the form of preface or foreword. Then there should be a table of contents followed by a list of tables, illustrations, so that decision maker or anybody interested in reading the report can easily locate the required information in the report with the help of preliminary pages. Then comes main text. The main text provides the complete outline of the research report along with all details. Title of the research study is repeated at the top of the first page of the main text, then follows the other details on pages numbered consecutively, beginning with the second page. Each main section of the report should begin on a new page. The main text of the report should have the following sections: introduction, statement of findings and recommendations, the results, the implications drawn from the results, and the summary. Then, part C is that end matter. At the end of the report, appendices should be enlisted in respect of all technical data such as questionnaires, sample information, mathematical derivations, and so on. So, bibliography of sources consulted should also be given, index, an alphabetical listing of names, places, topics, along with numbers of the pages in a book or report on which they are mentioned or discussed, should invariably be given at the end of the report. The main text provides the complete outline about the research report along with all details. Title of the research study repeated at the top of the first page of the main text and then follows other details on page numbers consecutively. So beginning with the second page. So each main section of the report should begin on a new page. So it consists of the sections like introduction, statement of findings and recommendations, results, implication drawn from the results, and the summary. So end matter where we can discuss about the sources of bibliography from where you have extracted the data. So everything can be arranged in alphabetical manner. Then this is the part report parts, prefatory facts, main body, appended parts. So under prefatory parts, we'll have title page, letter of transmittal, letter of authorization, table of contents, summary, objectives, results, can, conclusions, recommendations, everything comes under prefatory part. Coming to the main part body, it will have introduction, methodology, results, limitations, conclusions, and recommendations. And appended parts includes data collection forms, detailed calculations, general tables, bibliography. And tailoring the format to the project. The format of a research report may need to be adjusted for two reasons: to obtain the proper level of formality and to decrease the complexity of the report. The following exhibit illustrate how the format is adapted to shorter, less formal reports. The situation may be compared to the way people's clothing varies according to the formality of the occasion. The most formal report is dressed, so to speak, in a tuxedo or long evening gown. So that's how we have projected this particular diagram. So the guidelines to call for each element of the report also dictate the content of each part, title page. So where we used to state the title of the project, for whom the report was prepared, by whom it was prepared, and the date of release or presentation. And the title should give a brief but complete indication of the purpose of the research project, addresses, and titles of the preparer and recipient may also be included. On the confidential reports, the title page may list the people to whom the report should be circulated. For the most formal reports, the title page is preceded by a title fly page which contains only the report's title. Then letter of transmittal. It is relatively formal and very formal reports include a letter of transmittal. Its purpose is to release or deliver the report to the recipient. It also serves to establish some rapport between the reader and the writer. This is the one part of formal report in which a personal or even slightly informal tone should be used. The transmittal should not dive into the report findings except in broadest terms. The next, letter of authorization. The letter of authorization is a letter to the researcher that approves the project, details who has responsibility for it, and describes the resources available to support it because the researcher would not write this letter personally. Writing guidelines will not be discussed here. In many situations, simply referring to the authorization in the letter of transmittal is sufficient. If so, the letter of authorization need not be included in the report in some cases, though the reader may be unfamiliar with the authorization or may need detailed information about it. In such cases, the report should include this letter, preferably exact copy of the original. Then the table of content. A table of content is essential to any report more than few pages long. It should list the divisions, subdivisions of the report with page references. The table of content is based on the final outline, but it should include only first level subdivisions. For short reports, it is sufficient to include only main divisions. If the report includes many figures or tables, a list of these should immediately follow the table of contents. Then comes the summary. The summary is also known as executive summary. It briefly explains about why the research project was conducted, what aspects of the problems were considered, what the outcome was, and what should be done. It is a vital part of the report. Its studies have indicated that nearly all managers read a reporter's report summary while only a minority read to rest of the report. Thus, a writer's only choice to produce an impact may be in the summary. The summary should be written only after the rest of the report has been completed. It represents the essence of the report. It should be in one page long or at most two pages. So the writer must carefully sort out what is important enough to be included in it. So several pages of full report may have to be condensed into one summarizing sentence. So some parts of the report may be condensed more than others. The number of words in the summary need not be in proportion to the length of the section being discussed. The summary should be written to be self sufficient. In fact, the summary is often detached from the report and circulated by itself. A summary contains four elements. First, it states the objective of the report, including the most important background information and the specific purpose of this sub project. Second, it represents methodology and the major results. Finally, the conclusions of the reports are presented. These opinions based on the results and constitute an interpretation of the results. And finally, comes to recommendations or suggestions for action based on the conclusions. In many cases, managers prefer not to have recommendations included in the report or summary. Whether or not recommendations are to be included should be clear from the particular context of the report. The body constitutes the bulk of the report. It begins with an introduction section setting out background factors that made the project necessary as well as the objectives of the report. So it continues with the discussions of the methodology, results, limitations, and finish with conclusions and recommendations based on the results. The introduction, it explains why the project was done, what it aimed to discover. It should include the basic authorization and submittal data, and relevant background comes next. The second part of the body is research methodology section, and it is a challenge to write because it must explain technical procedures in a manner appropriate for the audience. So this part addresses four topics: research design. Was the study exploratory, descriptive or casual? Did the data come from primary or secondary sources? Were results collected by survey, observation or experiment? A copy of survey questionnaire or observation form should be included in the appendix. Why was this particular design suited to the study? So all these things we need to explain under this part, research methodology. Then sample design. What was the target population? What sampling frame was used? What sample units were used? How were they selected? How large was the sample? What was the response rate? Detailed computations to support these explanations that should be saved for the appendix. Then data collection and field work. How many and what type of field workers were used for? What training and supervision did they receive? Was the work verified? This section is important for establishing the degree of accuracy of the results. Then comes analysis, and it should outline the general statistical methods used in the study, but the information presented here should not overlap with what is presented in the result section. Both should be same. And result section should make up the bulk of the report and should present in some logical order those findings of the project that bear on objectives. So we need to maintain the same relation from the objective till report writing. And the result should be organized as a continuous narrative designed to be convincing but not to oversell the project. So summary tables, charts should be used to aid discussion, and these may serve as the points of reference to the data being discussed and free the prose from excessive facts or figures. Comprehensive or detailed charts, however, should be saved for the appendix. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.